Let me just tell you one story of leadership that has really shaped my life as a leader. And it drove home to me many years ago one of the most important characteristics of being a leader. I was working at that time, I was a professor at the University of Houston at that time, and I happened to be working a lot at the Johnson Space Center that NASA operates down southeast of Houston in the Clear Lake area. And so I had several students with me, and I was working on some projects there I found very interesting. And after a while, I was asked to take on the leadership of a particular project that was important to the division I was working with. I won't get into it, but it was a software development project. I won't go into details of that. And so I was sort of given a number of people to work with, my team. I was given a timeline and given specifications for the software we were to actually build. And I was pretty used to software engineering on a small scale. This was a little bigger project than I'd done before, but I thought, no big deal. We can make this work. It seemed very straightforward. And so we began working on this software project. And I met every day with the team twice. We'd meet first thing in the morning and at the end of the day and sort of talk about in the morning what the day would bring, and then at the end of the day review what we'd accomplished and then start the next day the same way. And we hadn't been working on this project more than about a week when I became aware that we were already behind schedule. We weren't making much progress. And so the second week I got a little more vocal with the group and began to tell them, this is not acceptable. We've got to get more work done. And yet, the more I talked to them about this, the more excited I got about not getting the job done on time, the further behind we got. So every day this got more frustrating to me, and I was getting more angry each day with my team. There were 7 people plus myself in this team. I had been brought to the Johnson Space Center by an engineer that I won't name his name here, but he's still working there. He's been there over 50 years. He actually designed the software that was in the lunar lander for the Apollo program. So good friend of mine today, great mentor to me. So he was the guy who had given me this particular project, and he would see me every day meeting with my team, and he would walk by outside the room we were in, and I'm sure he overheard what I was telling the team members. And again, I was getting louder and louder each day as I got more angry about how far behind we were getting. And one day he pulled me aside and he told me something I'll never forget. It's a lesson I learned then, and I've kept with me all the years since. He said to me, Bowen, you need them, that is your team, more than they need you. And I thought that was an extraordinarily good piece of advice. I could not do the job myself. There was no way. It was too big a job for one person to do in the time we had. And I had to have the team to get the job done. They did need me, though, to get the job done. That's what it came down to. And so I had to really kind of recalibrate everything I was thinking about. And the very next meeting I had with them, I sat down and said, okay, tell me what we have to do to get the job done. And I began asking them for their opinion and their advice about how we should go about doing this particular project, rather than telling them each day, here's what we're going to do, and not getting it done. And within about 8 days, we were ahead of schedule. And we got the job done ahead of schedule, under budget, and certainly ahead of schedule. And I really learned from that leadership is not about telling people what to do. It's about engaging with them and listening to what they think needs to be done and how to do it, and trying to a dialogue process shape the project in the way it should go. So I hope you can, you maybe already learned this yourselves, but something I learned many years ago as a pretty young guy, and it stuck with me all my life since that time. And I can't claim to be a great leader necessarily, but I do have to lead a lot. And I always remember that experience I had there. A second experience I had in the same location at NASA also is probably worth talking about. A different project was being carried out with me as the lead. And I had learned my lesson by that time, so we were doing good work, and it was moving along very nicely. It was a pretty exciting project, and I was interviewed by the local paper about this. NASA has an internal paper that circulates among the engineering staff there and others. And so they interviewed me about this project, took some pictures and everything, and I was going to do a feature story about it. And so as I was interviewed, we talked about the reason we did the project, who was involved in the project, what everybody did, and what the outcomes were going to be. And surprisingly to me, after the interview, the reporter came back to me with a draft of the story for me to look at. And that's pretty rare, by the way. If you ever talk to a reporter, they almost never show you what they're going to put in the paper. So she came back to me and went over it with her and made a few corrections. It was pretty good, though, and I was very happy with that. So I knew the next day it'd be coming out in the paper, and I got there the next morning to meet with my group, and I didn't have a copy of the paper yet. I hadn't seen it yet. So I walked in the room, and I could tell things weren't quite right. We didn't have the usual banter that morning and talking about things, and the team members I was talking to were pretty cold and not very happy with me. It was pretty clear. I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And we went through our meeting, and it wasn't very pleasant. And I still didn't know what was going on. So finally I pulled aside the one I knew the best. I said, what's wrong, guys? Are you mad at me today for something? He said, well, yeah, we're mad at you. How could you do that to us? And I said, what do you mean? Well, I then saw laying around copies of the paper for that day. And I went over and picked it up and read it, and I knew right away what the problem was. The article I had seen did not appear in print in the form I saw it. They had taken out a paragraph. The paragraph removed was the one which talked about what everybody in the team did on the project. So if you read the article without that, it sounded like I did everything. And so the team thought I had simply taken all the credit for what they had done and given them none at all. Not even mentioned their names even. And so they were really ticked off at me. And I had to explain, well, this isn't what I said. Well, it's hard to correct that perception after it's been created. So my point is giving credit to people that work with you in a team is extraordinarily important for every leader. And you have to be very careful how you deal with reporters. And I've had many lessons about that latter part over the years since that time. But again, the lesson really is simply that leadership involves not you, but again, the team and what they do. And so always as a leader, you need to be ready to and always active in giving credit to your team members, praising them for what they do, thanking them for their contributions. You can't give money sometimes, but you can give them pats on the back. It goes a long ways. Those are just two anecdotes. Those are real stories. Those really happened to me many, many years ago, and they've taught me a lot about how to do my job.